She thought it was just a casual romance with a handsome stranger. He disappeared the next morning, leaving no contacts or clues about who he really was. The day she discovered she was pregnant with twins, she thought she would be alone forever. But he came back, with an entire empire at his feet. Maya stood in the small bathroom of her apartment, her hands trembling as she stared at the pregnancy test in her grip. The two pink lines were unmistakable, screaming a truth she wasn't ready to accept. She blinked, hoping the result would change, but it didn't. Positive. She was pregnant. And not just pregnant, pregnant with twins. The weight of the revelation pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She slid down the wall, her knees buckling beneath her, and sat on the cold, tiled floor. Her mind raced back to that night, the one she had tried so hard to forget. The night that changed everything. It had been a rare escape from her monotonous routine. Maya, a dedicated high school teacher, had finally caved to her best friend Leela's persistent pleas to go out. "You need to live a little, Maya," Leela had said, dragging her to a trendy club downtown. The music had been loud, the lights hypnotic, and the atmosphere electric. And then there was him, Elijah. Tall, confident, with a smile that could disarm anyone. He had approached her on the dance floor, his presence magnetic. They danced, laughed, and talked for hours. He was charming, mysterious, and, as she would later realize, too good to be true. That night had been a blur of passion and impulsiveness, a moment of recklessness she hadn't allowed herself in years. And now it had come back to haunt her. Maya hugged her knees to her chest, her mind spiraling. How could she raise two children alone? She barely had enough to support herself, let alone twins. Her teaching salary was modest, and her apartment was barely big enough for one person, let alone three. She had always dreamed of starting a family someday, but not like this. Not with a man she barely knew, a man who had disappeared without a trace after that night. The sound of her phone buzzing on the counter snapped her out of her thoughts. It was Leela. Maya hesitated before answering, her voice shaky. "Hey, Maya, you okay?" "You sound off," Leela said, her tone laced with concern. Maya swallowed hard. "I'm fine. Just tired. Tired, huh? You've been tired a lot lately." "What's going on?" Maya opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. She couldn't keep this to herself anymore. "Leela, I need to tell you something." There was a pause on the other end. "Okay, you're scaring me." "What is it?" Maya took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Leela exhaled sharply. "Pregnant? Maya, are you serious? Dead serious? And it's twins, twins. Oh my God. Does he know? No. And I don't even know how to find him. He disappeared after that night," Leela groaned. "Of course he did. Typical. Look, Maya, whatever you decide to do, I'm here for you. But you need to think about your options. This is a lot." Maya nodded, even though Leela couldn't see her. "I know. I need some time to process this." After hanging up, Maya forced herself to get up and get ready for work. She couldn't afford to miss another day, no matter how exhausted she felt. As she stood in front of the mirror, her reflection stared back at her, pale, tired, and overwhelmed. She tried to smooth her dark, braided hair and put on a brave face, but the cracks were beginning to show. At school, Maya tried to focus on her students, but the nausea and fatigue were relentless. She barely made it through her first class before rushing to the restroom, her hand clamped over her mouth. When she returned, One of her colleagues gave her a knowing look. "You okay, Maya? You've been looking a little green lately." "I'm fine," Maya lied, forcing a smile. "Just a stomach bug." But the truth was, she wasn't fine. She felt like she was drowning, barely keeping her head above water. And it didn't help that one of her students' parents had decided to make her day even harder. After school, as she was packing up her things, a man stormed into her classroom. He was the father of one of her students, and he looked furious. "Miss Johnson, I need to talk to you," he said, his tone sharp. Maya straightened, bracing herself. "Of course. What's the matter?" "It's about my son's grade. I don't understand why he's failing your class. Are you even competent as a teacher?" The accusation stung, but Maya kept her composure. "Your son has missed several assignments and hasn't been participating in class. I've tried to reach out to him, but that's not good enough," the man interrupted. "Maybe if you weren't so distracted all the time, you'd actually be able to teach." Maya felt the tears welling up, but she refused to let them fall. "I'm doing my best, sir. But your son needs to take responsibility for his work." The man scoffed and stormed out, leaving Maya emotionally drained. She sank into her chair, her hands trembling. How was she supposed to handle this? Between the pregnancy, the stress at work, and the uncertainty about Elijah, she felt like she was falling apart. That night, Maya sat on her couch, staring at the tiny ultrasound photo she had picked up from her doctor's office earlier that day. 2 little blobs on the screen, her babies. She traced the image with her finger, her heart aching with a mix of fear and love. She didn't know how she was going to do this, but she knew one thing for sure: she was going to keep them, no matter what. Just as she was about to turn in for the night, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello, is this Maya Johnson?" a formal voice asked. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Robert Carter. I'm an attorney representing Elijah Grant. He's asked me to reach out to you." Maya's breath caught in her throat. Elijah. After all this time, he was finally reaching out. But why now? And what did he want? She looked down at the ultrasound photo again, her heart pounding. What does he want from me now? Maya stood at the door, her heart pounding as she stared at the man on her doorstep. Elijah, the man who had disappeared after their one night together, leaving her with nothing but memories and a life-altering secret. He looked just as she remembered, tall, broad-shouldered, with those piercing eyes that seemed to see right through her. But now, he carried an air of confidence that made her stomach twist. In his hands, he held a bouquet of flowers, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the storm of emotions swirling inside her. "Elijah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She hadn't expected him to show up unannounced, especially after the lawyer's call. Part of her had hoped he'd never come back. But here he was, standing in front of her, as if no time had passed. "Maya," he replied, his voice smooth and low. He extended the flowers toward her, a small, tentative smile playing on his lips. "I know this is unexpected, but I needed to see you." She hesitated before taking the flowers, her fingers brushing against his for the briefest moment. The contact sent a jolt through her, a reminder of the night they'd shared. A night she tried so hard to forget. "Come in," she said finally, stepping aside to let him in. She didn't trust herself to say more. Her mind was racing, trying to process why he was here, what he wanted. She led him to the living room, where the faint smell of baby powder lingered, a reminder of the life growing inside her. Elijah glanced around the room, taking in the modest decor. His eyes lingered on the ultrasound photos on the coffee table, and Maya's stomach tightened. She hadn't meant for him to see them so soon. "You've been busy," he said, his tone unreadable as he picked up one of the photos. His thumb brushed over the image, and for a moment, Maya thought she saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or regret. "I didn't think I'd see you again," she admitted, crossing her arms over her chest. It was a defensive gesture, one she hoped would shield her from whatever he was about to say. Elijah set the photo down and turned to face her. "I didn't plan to disappear, Maya. Things got complicated. But when I found out about the twins, I knew I had to come back." "And what do you want, Elijah?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. "You show up here with flowers, act like nothing happened, and expect me to just, what? Welcome you back with open arms." He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "I don't expect anything. I just want to be part of their lives." "Our lives?" Maya's heart clenched at his words. Part of her wanted to believe him, to let him in. But another part, the part that had spent countless nights crying over his absence, wasn't ready to trust him. "You don't even know me," she said quietly. "You don't know what I've been through these past few months. You don't get to just waltz back in here and act like everything's fine." Elijah stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "I know I messed up, and I know I can't undo that. But I'm here now, Maya. I want to make things right." She wanted to believe him, but the skepticism in her mind was louder than the hope in her heart. "Why now? Why not before? Why wait until I'm already dealing with everything on my own?" He hesitated, and for the first time, she saw a crack in his confident demeanor. "I didn't know how to handle it," he admitted. "I've never been in this situation before. But when I heard about the twins, I realized I couldn't just walk away. Not from them. Not from you." Maya's breath hitched at his words. She wanted to believe him, to trust that he meant what he said. But the memory of his absence still lingered, a shadow over her heart. "You're saying all the right things," she said slowly. "But actions speak louder than words, Elijah. And so far, your actions haven't exactly inspired confidence." He nodded, as if expecting her response. "I get that. And I'm not asking for your trust right away. I just want a chance to prove myself. To you. To them." She studied him for a long moment, trying to gauge his sincerity. He seemed genuine, but Maya knew better than to let her guard down too quickly. "Fine," she said finally. "We'll talk. But I'm not making any promises." Elijah's shoulders relaxed slightly, and he gave her a small, grateful smile. "That's all I'm asking for." As they sat down to talk, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger storm. Elijah was back, and whether she liked it or not, her life was about to change all over again. Later that night, after Elijah had left, Maya sat on the couch, staring at the flowers he'd brought. They were beautiful, but they felt like a symbol of something she wasn't sure she was ready for. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen. It was a message from an unknown number. *, be careful with Elijah. He's not what he seems. *, Maya's heart skipped a beat as she read the words. She stared at the screen, her mind racing with questions. Who had sent this? And what did they know about Elijah that she didn't? She typed a quick response, her fingers trembling slightly. *, who is this? *, the reply came almost instantly. *, Asterisk, someone who knows the truth. Be careful, Maya. Asterisk, she set the phone down, her thoughts swirling. Elijah had seemed sincere, but now this message had planted a seed of doubt. What if he wasn't who he claimed to be? What if trusting him would only lead to more heartache? Maya looked at the ultrasound photos on the table, her hand instinctively resting on her stomach. She had to protect her babies. But as much as she wanted to push Elijah away, a part of her couldn't ignore the hope that maybe, just maybe, he could be the partner she and the twins needed. The question lingered in her mind as she sat in the quiet of her living room. Asterisk, what does he really want from me now? Asterisk. Maya stared at her phone, the anonymous message glaring back at her. Asterisk, be careful with Elijah. He's not what he seems. Asterisk, her heart raced as she tried to make sense of it. Who had sent this? And why? She glanced at the sleeping forms of her twins in their cribs, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm. She couldn't afford to let anything or anyone threaten their safety. The next morning, Maya called Leela, her voice shaky as she recounted the message. What if someone's trying to warn me about Elijah? What if he's hiding something worse than I thought? Leela, ever the practical one, suggested they investigate. We'll figure this out, Maya. But you need to stay calm. For the twins. Maya nodded, though she didn't feel calm at all. She spent the day at work distracted, her mind racing with possibilities. That evening, Elijah showed up at her doorstep, impeccably dressed as always, holding a bouquet of flowers. Maya hesitated before letting him in, the anonymous message still fresh in her mind. I've missed you, Elijah said, his voice soft but earnest. He placed the flowers on the table and glanced at the twins. They're beautiful, Maya. Just like their mother. Maya crossed her arms, her guard up. Why are you here, Elijah? What do you really want? Elijah sighed, running a hand through his hair. I told you I want to be part of their lives. And yours if you'll let me. Maya studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. Someone sent me a message. They said I should be careful with you. That you're not who you seem. Elijah's expression darkened. Who sent it? I don't know. It was anonymous. Maya's voice trembled. Is there something you're not telling me, Elijah? Something about your past? About this scandal you're involved in? Elijah hesitated, his jaw tightening. There are things I can't talk about right now, Maya. But I promise you, I'm not a threat to you or the twins. Maya shook her head, frustration bubbling up. You keep saying that, but how can I trust you when you won't even be honest with me? Elijah stepped closer, his eyes pleading. I'm trying to protect you, Maya. There are people who would hurt you to get to me. That's why I disappeared before. I thought I could handle it on my own, but I was wrong. Maya's breath hitched. What are you saying? That we're in danger. Elijah nodded grimly. But I'm here now, and I won't let anything happen to you or the twins. I just need you to trust me. Maya wanted to believe him, but the anonymous message lingered in her mind like a shadow. I don't know if I can, Elijah. Not yet. Over the next few days, Elijah tried to prove himself. He visited often, bringing gifts for the twins and offering to help with anything Maya needed. He even hired a private security detail to watch over her house, though Maya initially resisted. I don't need your money, Elijah, she snapped when he suggested it. I'm not offering money, Maya. I'm offering protection. Please let me do this for you, he insisted. Reluctantly, Maya agreed, but the tension between them remained. She couldn't shake the feeling that Elijah was hiding something big. One night, after the twins were asleep, Maya decided to do some digging on her own. She opened her laptop and searched Elijah's name, scrolling through articles about his business empire and the scandal that had nearly brought it down. One article caught her eye, an exposé claiming Elijah had been involved in illegal dealings with a former business partner. The partner, a man named Victor Kane, had allegedly gone rogue, taking millions with him and leaving Elijah to clean up the mess. The article suggested Victor was now on the run, wanted by the authorities. Maya's heart pounded as she read. Could Victor be the one behind the anonymous message? Was he trying to warn her about Elijah, or was he using her to get to him? She didn't know what to believe. The next day, Elijah showed up unannounced, his face grim. "We need to talk," he said, stepping inside. "Victor Kane, my former partner, he's been sending you messages, hasn't he?" Maya's eyes widened. "How do you know that?" "Because he's been trying to contact me too," Elijah admitted. "He's desperate, Maya. He wants money, and he's willing to do anything to get it. That's why I've been trying to keep you safe." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. "So it's true. He's dangerous." Elijah nodded. "But I'm handling it. I just need you to trust me." Maya wanted to scream. Trust him? How could she trust him when he'd kept so much from her? "You should have told me this from the beginning, Elijah. I have a right to know if my children are in danger." Elijah's expression softened. "You're right. I should have been honest with you. But I was scared, Maya. Scared of losing you and the twins before I even had a chance to be part of your lives." Maya looked away, her emotions a tangled mess. She didn't know what to feel, anger, fear, or something else entirely. "I need time to think," she said finally. Elijah nodded, his shoulders slumping. "I understand. But please, Maya, be careful. Victor is unpredictable, and I don't know what he's capable of." After Elijah left, Maya sat on the couch, her mind racing. She felt trapped, caught between a man she wasn't sure she could trust and a threat she didn't fully understand. That night, as she rocked one of the twins to sleep, she received another message. This time, it was a photo. Elijah, standing in a dimly lit room, shaking hands with a man she didn't recognize. The caption read, "Ask him about this." Maya's hands trembled as she stared at the image. Who was the man in the photo? And what did it mean? She wanted to confront Elijah, but she was afraid of what he might say, or what he might not say. The next morning, Maya called Leela, her voice shaking. "I don't know what to do, Leela. I feel like I'm being pulled in a million directions." Leela was quiet for a moment before responding. "You need to follow your gut, Maya. If something feels off, it probably is. But don't let fear make your decisions for you. You're stronger than you think." Maya took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Leela was right. She couldn't let fear control her. She needed answers, and she wasn't going to get them by sitting around. That afternoon, Elijah called. "We need to meet," he said, his voice urgent. "It's about Victor. He's made a move, and we need to act fast." Maya hesitated, her mind racing. "What kind of move?" "I'll explain everything when I see you. Just trust me, Maya. Please." Maya's heart pounded as she hung up the phone. She didn't know what to expect, but she knew one thing. She couldn't ignore this any longer. She grabbed her coat and headed out the door, her mind swirling with questions. "What do you want from me now?" she whispered to herself as she stepped into the cold afternoon air. Maya's heart pounded as she stared at the phone in her hand. The lawyer's words echoed in her mind, sharp and unrelenting. Asterisk, your children have been taken. Asterisk, she couldn't breathe. The room spun around her, and she clutched the edge of the counter to steady herself. Asterisk, the twins. Her babies. Gone. Asterisk, she dropped the phone and bolted toward the nursery, her legs moving on autopilot. The cribs were empty, the blankets tossed aside, and the room eerily silent. Maya's chest tightened as she scanned the space, her mind racing. Asterisk, how? Who? Asterisk, her knees gave out and she sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face. A knock at the door startled her. She stumbled to her feet, wiping her face, and opened it to find Elijah standing there, his face pale and stricken. "Maya," he said, his voice trembling. "I came as soon as I heard." She stared at him, her emotions a tangled mess of fear, anger, and desperation. "This is your fault," she hissed, her voice breaking. "Your mess. Your ex-partner did this. How could you let this happen?" Elijah stepped inside, his hands raised as if to calm her. "I know, Maya. I know. And I'm going to fix this. I swear to you, I'll get them back." She wanted to scream at him, to push him out the door and tell him to leave her life forever. But she couldn't. She needed him. The twins needed him. "What do we do?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Elijah took a deep breath, his expression hardening. "We find them. I've already started tracking down leads. My team is working on it. But I need you to trust me." Maya hesitated. Trusting Elijah felt like walking into a storm with no umbrella. But what choice did she have? She nodded, her throat too tight to speak. The hours that followed were a blur. Elijah made calls, his voice sharp and commanding as he coordinated with his security team. Maya sat on the couch, clutching a blanket, her mind replaying every moment of the twins' short lives. Their first cries, their tiny fingers wrapped around hers, the way they cooed when she sang to them. She couldn't lose them. She wouldn't asterisk. Elijah sat beside her, his presence both comforting and infuriating. "We'll find them," he said softly. "I promise." She turned to him, her eyes blazing. "You don't get to make promises, Elijah. This is your fault. You brought this into our lives. And now my babies are." She choked on the words, unable to finish. He flinched but didn't argue. "You're right. This is my fault. And I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if I have to. But right now, I need you to focus. We're going to get them back." Maya nodded, swallowing her anger. She had to stay strong. For the twins. The phone rang, shattering the tense silence. Elijah answered, his expression darkening as he listened. "Where?" he barked. "Fine. We'll be there." He turned to Maya. "We have a location. An abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. They're demanding money for the twins." Maya's stomach churned. "How much?" "5 million. I have the cash, but..." He hesitated. "It's a trap." "I know it. Of course it's a trap," she snapped. "But we don't have a choice. We have to go." Elijah nodded. "We'll go together. But you have to promise me you'll stay back." "Let me handle this." She wanted to argue, to tell him she could handle herself. But the thought of the twins in danger silenced her. "Fine. But if anything happens to them, I know," he said quietly. I won't let them down. The drive to the warehouse was tense, the air thick with unspoken fears. Maya stared out the window, her hands clenched into fists. Elijah glanced at her occasionally, his jaw tight with determination. When they arrived, the warehouse loomed before them, dark and foreboding. Elijah parked a distance away and turned to Maya. "Stay here. Please." "I'll get them." She shook her head. "No, I'm coming with you. They're my babies." He hesitated but finally nodded. "Stay behind me. And if things go south, run. Get out of here." They approached the warehouse cautiously, the silence unnerving. The door creaked open and a man stepped out, his face obscured by a hood. "You brought the money," he demanded. Elijah held up a briefcase. "It's all here." "Where are the twins?" The man gestured for them to follow. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit, the air thick with dust. Maya's heart raced as she scanned the room, searching for her babies. Then she saw them, two tiny figures in a makeshift crib, safe but frightened. "Mama!" one of them cried, reaching for her. Maya's heart shattered. She started toward them, but Elijah grabbed her arm. "Wait," he whispered. "It's not safe." The man laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "Smart move. Hand over the money and you can have them." Elijah stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "Take it. But if you ever come near them again, I'll destroy you." The man grabbed the briefcase and sneered. Big words for a man who's about to. Before he could finish, Elijah lunged at him, tackling him to the ground. The two men grappled, fists flying, until Elijah pinned him down. "Maya, take the twins and go," he shouted. Maya hesitated, torn between helping Elijah and protecting her children. But the twins' cries decided for her. She grabbed them, holding them close, and ran for the door. As she stepped outside, she heard a gunshot. Her blood ran cold. She turned back, her heart in her throat, and saw Elijah standing over the man, breathing heavily. He looked up at her, his face a mix of relief and exhaustion. "They're safe," he said quietly. "That's all that matters." Maya stared at him, her emotions a whirlwind. She wanted to hate him, to blame him for everything. But in that moment, all she felt was gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. Elijah nodded, his expression softening. "I told you I'd protect them. And I will. Always." Maya looked down at the twins, their tiny faces pressed against her chest. She whispered to them, her voice trembling, "I'll never let anything happen to you again." Maya sat on the edge of the couch, her hands resting on her knees as she stared at the floor. The house was quiet now, the twins asleep in their cribs upstairs. The stillness felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. She could still feel the adrenaline from the kidnapping coursing through her veins, the fear that had gripped her heart when she realized her babies were in danger. Elijah had saved them, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was part of the reason they'd been in danger in the first place. The door creaked open, and Maya's head snapped up. Elijah stood in the doorway, his face pale and drawn. He had a bandage wrapped around his arm from where he'd been injured during the fight with the kidnapper. He looked as exhausted as she felt, but there was a determination in his eyes that made her chest tighten. "Can I come in?" he asked softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Maya hesitated, her fingers curling into fists. She wanted to say no, to tell him to leave and never come back. But the memory of him risking his life for the twins, of him standing between them and danger, made her nod. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. For a moment they just stared at each other, the tension thick in the air. Then Elijah broke the silence. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "For everything. I should have told you about the mess I was in. I should have been honest from the start." Maya's throat tightened, but she didn't respond. She wasn't ready to forgive him, not yet. Elijah took a tentative step closer, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "I know I messed up. I know I put you and the twins in danger. But I swear, Maya, I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. I want to be part of their lives. I want to be part of your life." Maya looked away, her gaze falling to the floor. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he was telling the truth. But the fear was still there, a constant ache in her chest. "How can I trust you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "After everything that's happened, how can I know you won't just disappear again?" Elijah's jaw tightened, and he took another step closer. "Because I'm not that person anymore. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm trying to change. I want to be better for you, for the twins. I just need you to give me a chance." Maya closed her eyes, letting out a shaky breath. She didn't know what to do. Part of her wanted to push him away, to protect herself and the twins from getting hurt again. But another part of her wanted to believe him, to give him the chance to prove he was different. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can trust you again." Elijah nodded, his expression softening. "I understand. I don't expect you to trust me right away. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn that trust back. I need you to let me try." Maya looked up at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to say yes, to let him in. But the fear was still there, holding her back. "I need time," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to figure out what's best for the twins." Elijah nodded again, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, no matter what." Maya didn't respond, her mind racing as she tried to process everything. She felt torn, pulled in two different directions. Part of her wanted to protect herself and the twins, to keep Elijah at arm's length. But another part of her wanted to believe that he could change, that they could build a life together. Elijah cleared his throat, breaking the silence. I brought something for the twins." He reached into his pocket and pulled out two small stuffed animals, a teddy bear and a bunny. "I know it's not much, but I thought they might like them." Maya's heart ached as she took the stuffed animals from him, her fingers brushing against his. She looked down at them, her vision blurring with tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Elijah hesitated for a moment, then reached out and gently touched her arm. "I'm here, Maya. I'm not going anywhere." Maya looked up at him, her chest tightening. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he meant what he said. But the fear was still there, a constant reminder of everything that had happened. "I need to think," she said finally, her voice trembling. "I need to figure out what's best for the twins." Elijah nodded, his expression softening. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here, no matter what." Maya didn't respond, her mind racing as she tried to process everything. She felt torn, pulled in two different directions. Part of her wanted to protect herself and the twins, to keep Elijah at arm's length. But another part of her wanted to believe that he could change, that they could build a life together. Elijah cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "I should probably go. Let you get some rest." Maya nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Elijah hesitated for a moment, then leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I'll see you soon, Maya." And with that, he turned and walked out the door, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts. She sat there for a long time, staring at the stuffed animals in her hands. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, her heart torn between fear and hope. She didn't know what to do, didn't know if she could trust Elijah again. But as she looked down at the tiny faces of her twins, she knew she had to try. "I hope we can be a family," she whispered, her voice trembling with uncertainty. Chapter 6. The new beginning. Maya stood in the middle of the spacious living room, her hands resting on her hips as she surveyed the boxes scattered around. The new house was bigger than her old apartment, with enough room for the twins to grow and explore. Elijah had insisted on the move, saying it was the least he could do after everything they'd been through. She glanced over at him, his sleeves rolled up as he struggled to assemble a crib, his forehead creased in concentration. The sight was almost comical. A billionaire, used to boardrooms and high-stakes deals, now wrestling with a set of instructions that seemed determined to defy him. "Need help?" she asked, a small smile tugging at her lips. Elijah looked up, his expression a mix of frustration and relief. "I thought this would be easier," he admitted, holding up a piece of wood that didn't seem to fit anywhere. "I've negotiated multi-million-dollar deals, but this is a whole new level of complexity." Maya chuckled, walking over to kneel beside him. "Here," she said, taking the piece from his hands. "It goes like this." She slid it into place effortlessly, and the crib began to take shape. Elijah watched her, a look of admiration in his eyes. "You're amazing, you know that," he said softly. Maya felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "It's just a crib," she replied, brushing off the compliment. But deep down, his words warmed her. They were trying, both of them, to build something new, something stable for the twins. And for themselves. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Between unpacking, setting up the nursery, and adjusting to their new routines, Maya and Elijah barely had a moment to breathe. The twins, now a few months old, demanded constant attention, and Maya found herself juggling feedings, diaper changes, and sleepless nights. Elijah did his best to help, though his attempts were often clumsy. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Maya walked into the kitchen to find Elijah standing over the stove, a look of concentration on his face. The smell of burnt toast filled the air, and she couldn't help but laugh. "What are you doing?" she asked, leaning against the doorway. Elijah turned, holding up a spatula like a weapon. "I thought I'd make dinner," he said, gesturing to the chaos on the counter. "But apparently, cooking is harder than I remembered." Maya shook her head, stepping forward to take the spatula from him. "Let me help," she said, her tone gentle. Together, they managed to salvage the meal, and as they sat down to eat, Maya felt a sense of camaraderie she hadn't expected. They were learning to work as a team, even if it was in small, everyday ways. But not everything was smooth sailing. There were moments of tension, times when Maya's doubts crept in, whispering that Elijah might disappear again, that he might not be as committed as he seemed. One night, after the twins had finally fallen asleep, she found herself sitting on the couch, staring at the flickering TV screen without really seeing it. Elijah joined her, sitting close but not too close, as if sensing her need for space. "What's on your mind?" he asked quietly. Maya hesitated, then sighed. I worry," she admitted. "About us. About whether this is really going to work." Elijah reached for her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "I know I've made mistakes," he said. "And I know I can't erase the past. But I'm here now, Maya. I'm not going anywhere. His words were a balm to her fears, but they didn't erase them completely. Still, she nodded, leaning into him slightly. I want to believe that, she whispered. As the weeks passed, they fell into a rhythm. Elijah took on more responsibility with the twins, learning to change diapers and soothe their cries. Maya watched him with a mix of amusement and gratitude, marveling at how far he'd come. There were still moments of doubt, still times when she questioned whether they were doing the right thing, but those moments grew fewer and farther between. One afternoon, Evelyn came to visit, her eyes widening as she took in the new house. "This is beautiful," she said, turning to Maya. "You've done so well for yourself." Maya smiled, though she could see the question in her mother's eyes. Evelyn had always been wary of Elijah, and while she'd warmed up to him somewhat, Maya knew she still had her doubts. "We're doing our best," Maya said simply. Evelyn nodded, her gaze softening. "That's all anyone can ask for," she replied. Later, as they sat in the living room with the twins, Evelyn turned to Elijah. "You've changed," she said, her tone thoughtful. "I wasn't sure about you at first, but I think you're good for her." For them, Elijah met her gaze, his expression serious. "I'm trying to be," he said. "I know I have a lot to make up for." Evelyn nodded, seemingly satisfied, and the conversation moved on. But Maya felt a flicker of hope. If her mother, who had always been her staunchest protector, could see the change in Elijah, maybe there was a chance for them after all. That night, as they lay in bed, Maya turned to Elijah. "Thank you," she said softly. He raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For trying," she replied. "For not giving up on us." Elijah pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her. "I'm not going anywhere," he repeated, his voice firm. "We're in this together." Maya closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. For the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could build a future together. As they drifted off to sleep, Elijah whispered, "We're going to overcome everything together." Maya smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in months. "I hope so," she murmured. Chapter 7. The trip. Maya adjusted the rearview mirror, glancing at the twins sleeping peacefully in their car seats. Elijah sat beside her, his hands resting lightly on the steering wheel as the road stretched endlessly ahead. The decision to take this trip had been impulsive, born out of a need to escape the chaos that had consumed their lives. For the first time in months, Maya felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to rebuild what had been broken. The drive was quiet, the hum of the engine filling the silence. Elijah reached over, his fingers brushing against hers. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft. Maya nodded, though her mind was racing. She still wasn't entirely sure if this was the right decision, spending days on the road with Elijah, trying to reconnect while caring for the twins. But she had agreed, and now there was no turning back. They stopped at a small diner for lunch, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and a jukebox in the corner. Elijah carried one of the twins in a baby sling while Maya held the other. The waitress cooed over the babies, and for a moment, it felt like they were just a normal family. But the illusion didn't last long. As they sat down, Maya couldn't help but notice the way Elijah's eyes darted around the room, as if he were scanning for threats. It was a habit he hadn't been able to shake since the kidnapping, and it reminded her of the danger that still lingered in their lives. "You know we're safe here, right?" she said, trying to sound reassuring. Elijah looked at her, his expression unreadable. I can't let my guard down. Not after what happened." Maya reached across the table, her hand covering his. I get it, but we can't live like that forever. We have to trust that we're okay now. He nodded, but she could tell his mind was still elsewhere. The rest of the day passed in a blur of travel and diaper changes. By the time they reached the cabin Elijah had rented, Maya was exhausted. The twins, however, were wide awake and fussy. Elijah took charge, setting up the portable cribs while Maya fed the babies. For all his wealth and influence, he was still awkward when it came to the practicalities of parenting, and Maya couldn't help but smile as he fumbled with the crib instructions. Need help? She asked, her voice teasing. He shot her a mock glare. I've got this. I'm a billionaire, remember? I can handle a crib. Clearly, she said, laughing as one of the sides collapsed. By the time the twins were finally asleep, Maya and Elijah were both sprawled on the couch, too tired to move. The cabin was cozy, with a fire crackling in the fireplace and the sound of the wind rustling through the trees outside. For the first time in what felt like forever, Maya felt a sense of peace. She leaned her head against Elijah's shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her. This is nice, she said softly. Yeah, he agreed. It is. The next few days were a mix of chaos and quiet moments. They took turns caring for the twins, exploring the nearby trails and cooking meals together. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, times when Maya's doubts crept in or when Elijah's past seemed to loom over them. But slowly, they began to find a rhythm. One evening, after the twins were asleep, Elijah surprised Maya with a candlelit dinner on the porch. He had cooked badly, but it was the thought that counted. Not bad for a billionaire, huh? He said, grinning as he poured her a glass of wine. Maya laughed. I've had worse. They talked for hours, sharing stories and dreams. Elijah opened up about his childhood, the pressures of his family, and the mistakes he had made. Maya listened, her heart aching for the boy he had been and the man he was trying to become. I don't want to mess this up, he said, his voice raw with emotion. You and the twins, you're everything to me. Maya reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. We're not going anywhere. But we have to take it one day at a time, okay? He nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. The trip wasn't just about reconnecting. It was about rediscovering who they were as individuals and as a couple. Maya realized that she had been so focused on protecting herself and the twins that she had forgotten what it felt like to let someone in. And Elijah, for all his flaws, was trying. On their last day, they took the twins to a nearby lake. The water was calm, reflecting the clear blue sky. Elijah held one of the babies, pointing out the ducks, while Maya watched, her heart swelling with a mixture of love and hope. As the sun set, they sat on the dock, the twins wrapped in blankets. Elijah turned to Maya, his expression serious. I know I've made mistakes, he said. And I know I don't deserve you. But I want to spend the rest of my life trying to be the man you and the twins need. Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. You already are. He leaned in, his lips brushing against hers in a kiss that felt like a promise. When they pulled away, Maya rested her head on his shoulder, watching as the stars began to appear in the sky. We'll figure it out, she said softly. Elijah nodded, his arm tightening around her. Together, as they sat there, the sound of the water lapping against the dock and the twins' soft breathing filling the air, Maya felt a sense of peace she hadn't known was possible. I hope so, she whispered. #Chapter 8. The commitment Maya stood in the kitchen, her hands resting on the counter as she stared at the ultrasound pictures pinned to the fridge. The twins were growing fast, their tiny faces becoming more defined with each passing day. She could hardly believe how much her life had changed since that fateful night at the club. Elijah had become a constant in her life, though not without its challenges. He was trying, she could see that, but trust wasn't something easily rebuilt. The sound of the front door opening pulled her from her thoughts. Elijah stepped inside, his suit slightly wrinkled from a long day at work. He carried a bag of groceries in one hand and a bouquet of flowers in the other. "I thought we could cook dinner together tonight," he said, setting the groceries on the counter. "Something special?" Maya raised an eyebrow. "You cooking? This should be interesting," he chuckled, running a hand through his hair. "Hey, I'm full of surprises. Besides, I figured it's time I start pulling my weight around here." She smiled despite herself, taking the flowers from him and inhaling their sweet scent. "They're beautiful." "Thank you." As they began preparing the meal together, Elijah chopping vegetables with surprising precision, Maya seasoning the chicken, she couldn't help but feel a sense of normalcy she hadn't felt in months. It was moments like these that made her wonder if they could truly build a life together. But just as she was beginning to relax, her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at the screen and froze. It was an unknown number, but the message was clear. Asterisk, you think you're safe. Think again. Asterisk, her heart raced as she showed the message to Elijah. His expression darkened, and he immediately pulled out his own phone to make a call. "We need to tighten security," he said, his voice firm. "This isn't over." Maya wrapped her arms around herself, the warmth of the kitchen suddenly feeling cold. "I thought we were past this. I thought we were finally moving forward." Elijah turned to her, his eyes filled with determination. "We are. But I won't let anyone threaten you or the twins." Not again. The rest of the evening was tense, the unspoken fear lingering between them. But as they sat down to eat, Elijah reached across the table and took her hand. "Maya, I know I've made mistakes. I know I've hurt you. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Whatever comes our way, we'll face it together." She squeezed his hand, her heart torn between hope and fear. "I want to believe that. I really do. But every time I start to let my guard down, something happens to remind me why I shouldn't." Elijah nodded, his gaze steady. "I get that. And I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove that I'm worth it." The sincerity in his voice made her chest tighten. She wanted to believe him, to believe that they could build something real. But the scars of the past ran deep, and the threat looming over them was a stark reminder of how fragile their newfound peace was. The next few days were a blur of heightened security and sleepless nights. Elijah hired a team to monitor their home, and Maya couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She tried to focus on the twins, on the life they were building together, but the shadow of danger was always there, lurking just out of sight. One evening, as they sat on the couch with the twins sleeping peacefully in their bassinets, Elijah turned to her. "Maya, I've been thinking, I want to make this official. I want to commit to you and the twins, to show you that I'm all in." She blinked, surprised by the suddenness of his words. "What are you saying?" He took a deep breath, his eyes locking onto hers. "I'm saying I want to marry you. I want us to be a family, not just in name but in every way that matters." Her heart pounded in her chest, a mix of emotions flooding her. She wanted to say yes, to let herself believe in the future he was offering. but the fear of getting hurt again held her back. Elijah, I don't know. This is a lot. And with everything that's happening, he nodded, not pressing her for an answer. I understand. Take your time, but know that I'm serious about this. About us. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Maya found herself torn between the desire to trust Elijah and the fear of what might happen if she did. But as she watched him with the twins, how gentle he was, how much he clearly loved them, she began to see a side of him she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge before. One night as they lay in bed, the twins sleeping soundly in the nursery, Elijah turned to her. Maya, no matter what happens, I want you to know that I'm here for you. For them, you don't have to do this alone. She looked at him, her heart swelling with a mix of love and fear. I want to believe that. I really do. But it's hard, Elijah. After everything we've been through, he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I know, and I don't expect you to forget the past. But I'm asking you to let me be a part of your future. Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded. Okay, let's do this. Together, the next morning they sat down to discuss their plans. Elijah suggested they move to a more secure location, somewhere they could start fresh without the constant reminders of the threats they'd faced. Maya agreed, feeling a sense of relief at the idea of leaving the past behind. As they packed up their belongings, preparing for the move, Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. It wasn't going to be easy, she knew that, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like they were on the right path. That evening, as they stood on the porch of their new home, the twins sleeping peacefully inside, Elijah turned to her. We're going to be okay, Maya. No matter what comes our way, we'll face it together. She nodded, leaning into his embrace. I believe you, Maya whispered to Elijah. We'll overcome everything together. **, Chapter 9. Overcoming the threat **, the air was thick with tension as Maya paced back and forth in the living room, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. The faint sound of the twins cooing in their cribs upstairs did little to calm her racing thoughts. Elijah sat on the edge of the couch, his elbows resting on his knees, his face buried in his hands. The weight of the recent threat loomed over them like a dark cloud, threatening to shatter the fragile peace they had worked so hard to build. The anonymous caller had been relentless, their voice distorted and menacing over the phone. They had demanded money, threatened to expose Elijah's past, and worse, hinted at harming the twins. Maya's heart had clenched at the thought of her babies in danger. She had trusted Elijah to protect them, but now, even he seemed vulnerable. We can't just sit here and do nothing, Maya said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and frustration. They're threatening our children, Elijah. Our children? Elijah looked up, his eyes shadowed with guilt and determination. I know, Maya. I'm not going to let anything happen to them. I've already called my security team. They're tracking the call as we speak. Maya stopped pacing and turned to face him, her arms dropping to her sides. And what if they can't find them? What if this person, whoever they are, gets to us first? Elijah stood, his tall frame towering over her as he stepped closer. He reached out, hesitating for a moment before placing his hands gently on her shoulders. Maya, I know I've made mistakes. I know I haven't always been the man you needed me to be. But I swear to you, I will do whatever it takes to keep you and the twins safe. I won't let anyone hurt our family. His words were firm, his gaze unwavering, but Maya could still see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. She wanted to believe him, to trust that he could protect them, but the fear was too strong, too raw. She pulled away, crossing her arms again as she turned to look out the window. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the quiet neighborhood, but the beauty of the moment was lost on her. I don't know if I can go through this again," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I can't lose them, Elijah." "I can't." Elijah stepped closer, his presence warm and steady behind her. "You won't," he said firmly. "I won't let that happen. We'll get through this together." Maya closed her eyes, taking a deep breath as she tried to steady her racing heart. She wanted to believe him, to trust that they could overcome this, but the fear was still there, gnawing at the edges of her mind. The sound of Elijah's phone buzzing broke the silence, and he quickly answered it, his voice low and urgent as he spoke to his security team. Maya turned to watch him, her heart pounding in her chest as she waited for news. "They've traced the call," Elijah said, his voice tight with tension as he hung up. "It's coming from an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. My team is already on their way." Maya's breath caught in her throat. "And what about us? What are we supposed to do?" Elijah hesitated, his jaw tightening as he weighed their options. "We stay here," he said finally. "My team will handle it. They're trained for situations like this." Maya shook her head, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. "No, I'm not just going to sit here and wait. I need to know what's happening. I need to know that the twins are safe." Elijah's expression softened, and he reached out to gently cup her face in his hands. "Maya, I know you're scared. I am too. But the best thing we can do right now is trust my team. They'll take care of it." Maya wanted to argue, to insist on being involved, but the look in Elijah's eyes stopped her. There was a vulnerability there, a fear that mirrored her own. She nodded reluctantly, her shoulders slumping as the weight of the situation pressed down on her. The hours that followed were agonizing. Maya sat on the couch, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as she stared at the clock, each passing minute feeling like an eternity. Elijah stayed by her side, his presence a steady anchor in the storm of her thoughts. Finally, just as the first rays of dawn began to peek through the curtains, Elijah's phone buzzed again. He answered it quickly, his voice tense as he listened to the update. Maya watched him, her heart in her throat as she waited for news. "They got him," Elijah said, his voice heavy with relief as he hung up. "It's over, Maya. He's in custody. The twins are safe." Maya felt the tension drain from her body, leaving her weak and exhausted. She slumped back against the couch, her breath coming in shallow gasps as the reality of what had just happened sank in. Elijah sat down beside her, his arm wrapping around her shoulders as he pulled her close. "It's over," he repeated, his voice soft and soothing. "We're safe." Maya leaned into him, her head resting against his chest as she let out a shaky breath. The fear was still there, lingering in the back of her mind, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe that they could get through this. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting its warm light over the room, Maya and Elijah sat together, their arms wrapped around each other as they watched the twins sleep peacefully in their cribs. The threat was gone, but the scars it had left behind would take time to heal. "We'll get through this," Elijah whispered, his voice filled with quiet determination. Together, Maya nodded, her eyes closing as she let herself relax into his embrace. For the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope. They had faced the storm and come out the other side, and though the road ahead would be difficult, she knew they could face it together. Maya whispered to Elijah, We'll overcome everything together. Asterisk asterisk chapter 10. The future asterisk asterisk Maya stood by the window of their new home, the soft morning light filtering through the curtains. The twins, now a little over a year old, were giggling in their playpen, their tiny hands reaching for the colorful toys scattered around them. Elijah was in the kitchen, attempting to make breakfast while humming a tune she didn't recognize. It was a scene she had once thought impossible, a life of peace, stability, and love. The journey to this moment hadn't been easy. There had been so many nights filled with doubt, fear, and tears. But now, as she watched Elijah clumsily flip a pancake, something inside her shifted. It wasn't just the warmth of the morning sun or the laughter of the twins. It was the quiet realization that they had built something real together, something that had weathered storms and come out stronger on the other side. "I think I burned this one," Elijah called out, holding up a slightly charred pancake with a sheepish grin. Maya laughed, walking over to the kitchen. "Let me guess, you got distracted by your humming again." "Maybe," he admitted, scratching the back of his neck. "But I'm getting better, right?" She leaned against the counter, watching him pour batter onto the pan. "You're definitely improving." Although I'm not sure the twins would agree if they could talk yet. Elijah chuckled, his eyes softening as he glanced at the playpen. "They're going to be ruthless when they're older." "I can already tell." Maya smiled, her heart swelling with affection. It was moments like these that made her believe in the life they were creating together. After everything they had been through, the uncertainty, the danger, the emotional roller coaster, they had found a rhythm. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. As they sat down to eat, Elijah reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "I was thinking," he began, his voice tentative, "maybe we could take a trip soon. Just the four of us. Somewhere quiet where we can just be." Maya tilted her head, considering his suggestion. "You mean like a vacation?" "Yeah," he said, nodding. "I know things have been crazy, and we've been so focused on settling in here. But I think it would be good for us. For all of us." She squeezed his hand, touched by the thought. "I'd like that. We could use some time away." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of laughter and shared glances. Maya marveled at how far they had come. There had been a time when she couldn't imagine trusting Elijah, let alone building a life with him. But now, as she watched him play with the twins, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known was possible. Later that afternoon, they decided to take the twins to the park. It was a beautiful day, the kind that made you believe in new beginnings. Elijah pushed the stroller while Maya walked beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. The twins babbled happily, their eyes wide with wonder as they took in the sights and sounds around them. As they sat on a bench, watching the twins play in the grass, Elijah turned to her. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Maya looked at him, her brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if I hadn't come back. If I hadn't fought for you and the twins. If I hadn't realized how much I needed you in my life." His voice was soft, tinged with vulnerability. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I try not to think about the what-ifs, because the truth is, you did come back. You fought for us, and now we're here together. That's what matters." Elijah nodded, his eyes searching hers. I want you to know that I'm never going to take this for granted. Not you, not the twins, not the life we're building. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life making it up to you." Maya felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "You already have, Elijah. Every day, you show me that you're here for us." That's all I've ever wanted." He pulled her into a hug, his arms warm and steady around her. For a moment, everything else faded away. The park, the noise, the world outside. It was just the two of them, holding on to each other and the life they had fought so hard to create. When they finally pulled apart, Elijah cupped her face in his hands, his gaze intense. "I love you, Maya." More than anything, she smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "I love you too." As they walked back to the car, the twins now asleep in the stroller, Maya felt a sense of contentment she hadn't known was possible. The future was still uncertain, and there would always be challenges to face. But for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face them, with Elijah by her side. That night, as they tucked the twins into their cribs, Elijah turned to her. "You know," he said, his voice soft, "I think we're going to be okay." Maya looked at him, her heart full. "I think so too." They stood there for a moment, watching the twins sleep, before Elijah reached for her hand. "Let's go to bed. Tomorrow's a new day." As they walked down the hallway together, Maya felt a surge of hope. The road ahead might not always be easy, but they had each other. And that was enough. She whispered to herself, her voice barely audible, "We're going to overcome everything together."